Well, Dr. Saul Zadka is a Middle East and Europe analyst. I asked him whether the war in Ukraine has stuck Israel between a rock and a hard place.
It would, because they are positioned themselves as being neutral. They like to define the country as the only democracy that maintains good relations with both countries, Russia and Ukraine. But this does not go down very well in Kiev. As we learned last night, when President Zelensky addressed Israeli parliaments, his fellow Jewish politicians, and he sharply criticized Israel's policy of neutrality. He denounced Israel's decision not to actively participate in the sanctions against Moscow. He also castigated Jerusalem for not willing to sell military defensive systems like the Iron Dome. And the Israelis on their part are saying that they are walking on a tightrope, and that's why they have to be very careful in order not to upset the Russians so much. After all, they share a kind of a border with the Russian forces in Syria. And as it happened in the last few years, President Putin is allowing the Israeli Air Force to bomb Hezbollah and Iranian revolutionary guards without interfering. And the Israelis are afraid to lose that. They are emphasizing the fact that they absorbed thousands of Ukrainian refugees, that they are now building a field hospital on the Polish side of the border. But Zelensky was quite adamant that Israel is not doing its best in order to help the Ukrainians.
And beyond the government of Israel, where do you think the Israeli population's sympathies lie in this war? I mean, I'm wondering whether President Zelensky's speech that you mentioned there struck a chord with the Israeli psyche.
Zelensky yesterday spoke above the Israeli politicians to the Israeli community at large. And it is quite significant that he did not address the Israeli parliament like he did in Britain or in Germany. He addressed selected number of Israeli politicians on Zoom, because as part of this schizophrenia, the Israelis did not want to assemble the Knesset for this special address. So in many ways, the Israelis are out of tune with their crowd, because the mayor of Tel Aviv allowed this address to be broadcast on the biggest square in the city. And you could see that the overall majority of the Israelis support the Ukrainians without any reservations. And I think there is a gap between the Israeli policy and the wishful of the public opinion in the country.
And briefly, Dr. Zadka, President Zelensky again asking Israel to host talks in Jerusalem. So far, we know that Turkey has been doing the hosting. Is there a reason why Israel would be a better choice, briefly?
This is because Prime Minister Bennett tried his best in order to position himself as an acceptable mediator. And it was actually Zelensky's idea to have peace talks in Jerusalem, a city that he defined as a kind of a place, an ideal place for a compromise. But I can see that the situation is so severe that Bennett is so far away from reaching this goal of trying to call both sides into a kind of a peace conference in Jerusalem. It's not going to happen anytime soon.
Dr. Zadka, thank you very much indeed. Dr. Saul Zadka is a Middle East and Europe analyst, and he was talking to me on the line there.